March 15th, 44 B.C. A man walks into a building. He has been warned. A fortune teller stopped him on the street and told him to beware this day. His wife begged him not to go. He even received a note, a written warning naming the conspirators, and never read it. He walked in anyway. 60 senators were waiting for him, hidden under their togas, daggers. What followed was not a revolution. It was not the birth of freedom. It was 23 stab wounds delivered in under 2 minutes, and the accidental destruction of everything the killers were trying to protect. But here is the question that has haunted historians for 2,000 years. What if the knife never fell? What if Caesar walked out of that room alive? The answer does not just change Rome. It changes everything. To understand what Caesar's survival would have meant, you first need to understand what kind of man Julius Caesar actually was. Not the statue, not the Shakespeare play, the real man. Caesar was born into a family with a famous name and almost no money. His father died when he was 16. He grew up in the Suburra, one of Rome's most dangerous slums. Cramped streets, criminal gangs, the kind of neighborhood where the Roman elite would never set foot. And from that neighborhood, he decided he was going to rule the world. By the time he was 30, Caesar had already been captured by pirates. Most men would have paid the ransom and gone home. Caesar laughed at the pirates, told them they were charging too little for someone as important as him, and promised to come back and crucify every single one of them. They thought he was joking. He wasn't. He paid the ransom, raised a fleet, hunted every single pirate down, and crucified them all. This is the man Rome was dealing with. By 58 BC, Caesar was given command of the Roman forces in Gaul, what is today France, Belgium, and parts of Germany. The Senate expected a minor military campaign. They expected him to come back in a few years with some tax revenue and a quiet legacy. Instead, Caesar spent 8 years conquering every tribe, every forest, every river crossing from the Rhine to the Atlantic. 1 million Gauls killed, another million enslaved. The richest territories in Western Europe absorbed into Rome. He didn't just win battles, he wrote about them. His own accounts, the Gallic Wars, became one of the most widely read works in the Latin language. He was his own propaganda machine. The Senate started getting nervous. And they had reason to be. Because while Caesar was conquering Gaul, the man who had been keeping the balance of power in Rome, Marcus Licinius Crassus, the wealthiest man in the Republic, made a catastrophic mistake. Crassus wanted military glory. He wanted to match Caesar and Pompey. So in 53 BC, he led 7 Roman legions into the desert of Mesopotamia to attack the Parthian Empire. The Parthians were waiting. At a place called Carrhae, Parthian horse archers surrounded the Roman legions under the blazing sun. The Romans had no answer for cavalry that never closed to fight. Cavalry that simply circled and fired, hour after hour, until the Roman formations began to crack. 20,000 Romans died that day. 10,000 more were captured, marched to the eastern edge of the known world, and never seen again. Crassus himself was executed, and according to legend, the Parthians poured molten gold down his throat, a final insult to the man who had wanted riches more than anything else. Rome never forgot Carrhae. The eagle standards, the sacred symbols of the fallen legions, were taken as trophies to the Parthian capital. For Rome, this was not just a military defeat, it was a national humiliation, a wound that refused to heal. And Julius Caesar intended to avenge it. With Crassus dead, the balance of the first triumvirate collapsed. Caesar and Pompey moved toward each other like 2 tectonic plates. Civil war erupted. Caesar crossed the Rubicon, the river that no Roman general was permitted to cross with an army, and marched on Rome itself. He won. Pompey fled to Egypt and was assassinated on the beach as he stepped ashore. Caesar followed him there, walked into a palace in Alexandria, and met a queen who had been smuggled to him, rolled up inside a carpet. Cleopatra. She was 21, he was 52, and whatever passed between them in Alexandria that night, it changed the destiny of the ancient world. By 44 BC, Julius Caesar had been declared Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. He sat on a golden throne in the Senate. His face was stamped on Roman coins, the first living Roman ever to receive that honor. He had already begun reordering the entire government so that every magistrate, every consul, every tribune would be appointed by him personally before he left for his next campaign. And that campaign was 3 days away. 16 legions, 60,000 soldiers, all assembled and ready to march east, first to conquer Dacia, then to invade Parthia, avenge Carrhae, and recover the stolen eagle standards. Some ancient sources say the plan didn't stop at Parthia. Plutarch wrote that Caesar intended to march through Parthia into Scythia, loop through Germania, and return to Rome having encircled the known world. A campaign that would have taken years. A campaign that would have made Alexander the Great look modest. But 60 senators decided otherwise. They called themselves the Liberatores, the Liberators, men like Marcus Junius Brutus, a man Caesar had personally pardoned after the Civil War, a man Caesar trusted. They believed they were saving the Republic. They believed that killing one man would restore 500 years of tradition. They were about to make the greatest miscalculation in the history of the ancient world. The morning of March 15th, 44 BC, Caesar's wife Calpurnia had spent the night in terror. She had dreamed of his body. She begged him not to go to the Senate that day. Caesar hesitated. Then one of the conspirators, Decimus Brutus, a man Caesar considered one of his closest friends, came to his home personally. He told Caesar that postponing the Senate meeting would look weak, that the senators were waiting, that the moment was now. Caesar got up, put on his toga, and walked out. A fortune teller named Spurinna had warned him weeks earlier, beware the Ides of March. As Caesar walked past him that morning, he said, reportedly with a smile, "The Ides of March have come." Spurinna replied, "Aye, Caesar, but not yet gone." In the antechamber of the theater of Pompey, the irony almost too perfect that Caesar would die in a building named for his greatest enemy, a man named Artemidorus tried to hand Caesar a scroll. It contained the names of every conspirator, every detail of the plot. Caesar's attendants intercepted it. He never read it. He walked into the Senate. The conspirators had arranged themselves around him. As Caesar took his seat, one senator approached and grabbed his toga, the signal. The first blade came from behind. Caesar grabbed it with his bare hand. He fought back. He looked for friends in the room, faces he recognized, men he had pardoned, men he had promoted, men he had saved. They were all holding daggers. 23 wounds. Caesar pulled his toga over his face as he fell, so that he would die with dignity. The conspirators ran into the street, waving their bloody daggers, shouting that Rome was free. The crowd stared at them in silence. No cheers, no celebration. The Roman people, the people Caesar had fed, forgiven, and fought for, looked at these senators with something closer to horror. Mark Antony delivered the funeral oration 3 days later. He unfolded Caesar's will in front of the crowd, the will that left every Roman citizen 300 sesterces and opened Caesar's private gardens to the public. Then he held up Caesar's blood-soaked toga, read every wound aloud. Rome burned, and the republic the assassins died to protect died with it. Now, what if Caesar had read that scroll? What if, on the morning of March 15th, 44 BC, Julius Caesar had unrolled the note from Artemidorus and read the names. The conspirators would have been arrested before sunset. Brutus, Cassius, all 60 of them, tried, exiled, or executed. Caesar had pardoned enemies before, but this was different. This was not a battlefield opponent. This was men he had trusted with his life. He would not pardon them twice. And 3 days later, March 18th, exactly as planned, Julius Caesar would march east with 16 legions. The first target, Dacia, the kingdom north of the Black Sea, ruled by a king named Burebista who had been threatening Rome's northern borders for years. Caesar's forces would have dealt with Dacia quickly. Burebista actually died the same year as Caesar in real history, his kingdom fragmenting without him. With Dacia neutralized, Caesar would turn south and east, into Armenia, into the heart of the Parthian Empire. Now here is where historians disagree. Some argue Caesar would have suffered the same fate as Crassus, destroyed by Parthian horse archers in the desert, his legions swallowed by the sand. But Caesar was not Crassus. Crassus marched directly across open desert, exactly where Parthian cavalry was most effective. Caesar's plan was different. He intended to approach through Armenia, mountainous terrain where horse archers lose their advantage. He had recruited 10,000 archers from Crete and the Balearic Islands specifically to counter Parthian tactics. He had studied what went wrong at Carrhae for a decade. And there is one more factor. Caesar had never lost a major campaign in his life. Let us say Caesar pushes east. His legions cross Armenia, descend into Mesopotamia from the north where the terrain favors Roman infantry. Parthia, already weakened by internal power struggles in this period, cannot hold. The eagle standards of Carrhae are recovered. The Parthian capital of Ctesiphon falls. Caesar returns to Rome not in 3 years, but perhaps 5, having done what no Roman before him had achieved, having avenged the greatest humiliation in Roman military history. He returns as something no title in the Roman vocabulary can contain. And this is where everything changes. While Caesar is in the east, something is waiting for him back in Rome. A boy. In Alexandria, Cleopatra has been raising a child she calls Caesarion, Little Caesar. The boy is now 3 years old. Dark eyes, said by ancient sources to carry the unmistakable look and manner of his father. Caesar never formally acknowledged Caesarion under Roman law. He couldn't. Roman law forbade marriage to foreign women, and Caesar was still married to Calpurnia. Caesarion existed in a legal gray zone. Biologically Caesar's son, officially nobody. But if Caesar returns from Parthia as the unquestioned master of the known world, who is going to tell him he cannot name his own blood as his heir? Roman law had never encountered a man like this before. In real history, when Caesar died, his will named a sickly 18-year-old great-nephew named Gaius Octavius as his primary heir. That young man became Octavian, and eventually Augustus, the first Roman emperor. The man who built the Pax Romana, 2 centuries of peace and prosperity. In our timeline, Octavian never becomes Augustus, because Caesar is alive, because Caesar has a son who is half Roman and half the last queen of the oldest continuous civilization on Earth. Caesarion would have grown up straddling 2 worlds, Roman power and Egyptian legitimacy. He would have inherited not just Rome, but Egypt's grain supply, Egypt's gold, Egypt's 2,000-year-old administrative tradition. The capital of this new empire would not have stayed in Rome. Caesar had already shown his vision in Alexandria, a cosmopolitan, multicultural, Greek-speaking city at the crossroads of the known world. Some historians believe he intended to move the seat of power eastward, to Alexandria, or perhaps to Troy, the mythological homeland of the Julian dynasty. This is no longer Rome as we understand it. This is something new. a fusion empire. Mediterranean, Near Eastern, Egyptian, eventually Persian. Governed not by the old republican traditions that were already dying, but by whatever Caesar decided to build next. And Caesar, unlike Augustus, had no interest in pretending. Augustus was careful. He kept the titles of the Republic. He called himself princeps, first citizen, not king, not emperor. He let the Senate believe it still mattered. Caesar would never have bothered with the illusion. He would have declared himself what he already was, king, or something beyond king. Perhaps, given his claimed divine descent from Venus, something approaching a god king in the Egyptian tradition. The Senate would have resisted. There would have been more plots, more conspiracies. Caesar had already survived them. With his eastern armies behind him, with Caesarion as his heir, with Cleopatra as his political partner, he crushes every one. Now we arrive at the question that keeps historians awake at night. If Caesar lives, does Augustus ever rise? No. Octavian, that sickly 18-year-old studying in Macedonia when Caesar was killed, has no reason to enter politics. No inheritance, no Caesar name, no path to power. He lives out a quiet life as a minor aristocrat and dies forgotten. And without Augustus, there is no Pax Romana. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, was 200 years of relative stability across the entire Mediterranean world. 200 years during which trade flourished, cities grew, roads connected everything from Britain to Mesopotamia. It was the infrastructure of a civilization. And it was inside that infrastructure, those Roman roads, that Roman peace, that Mediterranean connectivity, that a small religious movement in the province of Judea began to spread: Christianity. Paul of Tarsus traveled on Roman roads. The early church spread through Roman trade routes. The New Testament was written in Greek, the common language of the Roman East. Every missionary journey, every letter between early Christian communities, every council that shaped Christian doctrine, happened because the Roman world had been made stable and connected by Augustus. Without Augustus, without the Pax Romana, Judea in the 1st century AD looks very different. Caesar's empire, or Caesarion's empire, would have been larger, more eastern, more cosmopolitan. It might have crushed the Jewish revolts earlier. It might have absorbed Judea into an Egyptian-style religious framework that left no room for the exclusivity of early Christianity. Or the roads would simply not have been there. The stability would not have existed. We cannot say Christianity disappears. Religious ideas are stubborn. They find ways. But the specific shape of Western Christianity, its reach, its timing, its doctrines formed in those first 2 centuries, that shape was made possible by the Roman world Augustus built. Caesar's world would have been different, perhaps more brilliant, perhaps more brutal, perhaps stranger than anything we can imagine, but it would not have been ours. Go back to that room, March 15th, 44 BC. 60 senators, 23 daggers, one man who walked in without reading his warning. Brutus believed he was a hero. He had rehearsed a speech celebrating Rome's liberation. He was ready to walk out into the sunlight and be cheered. Instead, the crowd looked at him with fury. Within 2 years, Brutus would be dead, defeated in battle, falling on his own sword on a hillside in Macedonia. Within 14 years, every single conspirator would be dead. They saved nothing. The republic they killed for was gone within a decade, replaced by something far more absolute than anything Caesar had built. But here is the thing that haunts me most. The conspirators were not stupid men. They were not monsters. Brutus genuinely believed in what he was doing. He thought he was choosing Rome over his friend. And in a narrow sense, he was right that Caesar was dangerous. Caesar was accumulating power that no republic could contain. The tension was real. The threat to Roman tradition was real. But they could only see one step ahead. They could not see that killing Caesar would produce not the restoration of the republic, but Octavian, a man far colder, far more calculating, far more willing to destroy the republic completely, while pretending to preserve it. They could not see that the stability Augustus built would become the cradle of a religion that would outlast Rome by 2,000 years. They could not see that their act of violence, intended to preserve the past, would instead create the future. History does not move in straight lines. The men who shape it most are rarely the ones trying to. Brutus thought he was ending a story. He was writing the opening sentence of ours. If Julius Caesar had read that scroll on the morning of March 15th, if he had lived 3 more days and marched east with his 60,000 soldiers, there would be no Augustus, no Pax Romana, no cradle for the religion that would shape the next 2,000 years of human civilization. Perhaps a greater empire, perhaps a faster fall. Perhaps something so strange we have no words for it. But one thing is certain. The world you live in, every road, every church, every calendar you use, carries the fingerprints of 60 men who thought they were saving something, and instead made everything. If this made you see history differently, share it with someone who thinks they already know this story. Because they don't. Not really.